Recording started. So, want to start, Kento?
Yes. First of all, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the call today. As the one who opened the discussion to the public, sharing my opinions on this topic, I do hold myself accountable, and I want to say thank you for everyone who has been professional about this discussion. And as someone deeply involved and committed to the shuffle community, I understand the responsibility that comes with sharing knowledge and information. So I apologize for any tension or confusion or misunderstandings that I've caused to many people and also misinformation being spread, which is the reason why I've taken a couple of my recent posts down. Um, and I know with sharing my opinions publicly, there are many people that feel bitterness towards me. Um, I just wanted to let you guys know and everyone know that I have no intention to like make more money or more views or more followers through these posts, and I'm simply doing this to open up discussion to the public to be as informative as possible and believe that these discussions are necessary growing pains for more and more tournaments to be run efficiently and also on the education aspect so that we can all move forward as a community.
Yeah, I also kind of like what Kento said. I think I'm also aware of the position some of us like have within the community because of like some people posted content and they started growing a following. Some others just like hosted a lot of stuff, events, classes, etc. Like it's my case, and I've got to know many people of the community, and I've also in the past spread things that maybe now I don't believe in, or maybe they could have said differently. So I also like hold myself accountable to everything that I have said in the past, and I also will correct myself in the future if something that is being said now or anytime is I feel that is it wasn't true, because I think that we all have to like move forward and also be responsible for what we do. So I hope that also people don't feel bad if like they shared something that was not true, and now they have to like change, because I've been doing that for like years now, and now I don't believe in a lot of things that I said for years, and it was like something heavy on my shoulders, and also like publicly saying that I was wrong, or that I plan to like change what I share regarding this topic. It actually like helped me a lot, like personally. So if someone is feeling kind of like similarly to the situation, just know that also sharing and try to not be hard on yourself uh, will also help you personally, because like this is something that we everybody's very invested in, like shuffling. We all are here because we love it.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is like it's gonna be like an open space for everyone who wants to like join conversation. You can come to the stage and speak for you or for your community, because maybe some people is here like kind of in behalf of other people too who can't attend. So I'm also aware that a lot of this is kind of like started being talked again, kind of like sparked more because of like the podcast from the Shuffle Timeline. So I also see that there's a lot of people only seeing what maybe I or Kento posted. So also check Shuffle Timeline's work, because there's a lot of like history work that is very related to all this matter, because they're doing like a good job sharing information with the resources and links to everything. So make sure you check them as well. And I think we could open the debate, or like this talk, with say kind of like similar to what we did with the Spanish, which was have some people on the stage, and so they share what things are being discussed within their community or with their like friends about this matter, so we can also like get a good understanding of what's people concerns, to say it in a way, with all of this being said. So if anybody wants to join the stage, feel free to raise the hand, and and we'll let you in the stage.
And as far as it goes for today's discussions in the call, I believe that there's no need to fully agree on everything on what is what in the exact moment. I think it's important to acknowledge, like Marbiek said, to be open to changes and to be open to educating yourself and learning from all the different cultures from all around the world. And like Autumn has said in our teachers group chat that we have in Los Angeles. I'm going to quote her. What is important now is to figure out effective ways to coexist and co-create by educating one another on each other to get on a similar page of where everyone comes from and how everyone is doing their thing and why. The main focus at this point is how we can move forward to maximize inclusivity and growth in the community in tournaments and education. So while it is important to touch on all of these different subjects, I think the main thing I would say is that we want to all move forward as one. So,
Thank you for reading that, Kento. Truly comes from my heart. Also, I would like to take accountability for sharing some of my experience and some communication with Shuffle Timeline 2 and say that it was all in good favor to pretty much bring everyone together as well, and that there is definitely accountability needed to be taken for the way certain things can come off and be perceived. Even though if it wasn't my intention to do so, I take responsibility for the way that it can come off. So, um, with full intention of just joining everyone together and doing exactly what Kento just quoted. That's just kind of what I wanted to take accountability for and say that I'm standing with everyone on this, regardless of the individuals that may feel differently. We all feel differently and we all just kind of have to talk to each other. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
So Lefty, you wanted to join to maybe you want to share something that it's on your mind or within your community.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
yes.
Um, I mean, I've been listening to the past 2, 3 uh, Discord chats. They've gone over 4 or 5 hours. I feel like most importantly, what's gonna matter is moving forward. I feel like tournaments and battle weekends, they're gonna continue to be a big driving force for our community. We have teachers that teach classes, the tournament, the after session. So just finding a way to continue that is going to work differently for every country. I was listening how other countries, they haven't separated the categories and everything's working just fine. Um, you know, um, on the aspect of history, once we figure out what the facts are, then we can make that, we can make the history something that is non-debatable by having the facts. But as far as tournaments and categories, I feel like that should be the main focus moving forward. Just because this conversation really sparks after a tournament. The final of Bernard versus Andy, I feel like that's where this conversation sparks back up again. So we're able to. Everybody's going to be different. Every country's going to have different, ways to separate the categories. I just wanted to talk a little bit about on our behalf here in the US. Um, back in the day in 2016, 17, there was a lot of hate towards influencers. It was a really new thing. A lot of people were getting really popular off shapes. So it was, we lacked a lot of respect towards a lot of these people. I myself found myself, trash talking and disrespecting. I feel like we were kind of jealous of the views that they were getting so quickly. So I feel like a lot of the hate of the shapes is not shuffling came from that. But now we're in 2024. A lot of these people are, created uh, shuffle schools. They competed in tournaments. So a lot has changed. So I feel like here in the U.S., when it came to tournaments, we never separated the categories. And to us, it was never an issue because we had shapers that won the tournaments and we had shufflers that won the tournaments. That's because, in the dance, when it came to musicality and the techniques, some of them were able to win the whole tournament, even if it was you were battling against a shuffler. So our one of our first tournaments here, Donovan, which does a lot of shapes, he won the whole tournament, and there was really no issue. Sierra also won another tournament, the FTS tournament, and there wasn't really issues at all. And I feel like whenever there was issues about whether it was shuffling or not, it mostly came from people that they don't even really dance. So to us, it never kind of really mattered, and we just continue to have both styles of dancing within the same tournament. So I think personally, moving forward, that's probably the best way to go, even if you know there has to be a demand for a shapes tournament only, and a demand for Melbourne only tournament. And I don't even think you would be able to fill out 32 or 64 spots of only that style. And that's only because there hasn't been any demand. So moving forward, I feel like it's working for us over here. Maybe I'm wrong, but if somebody thinks that it would be a great idea to have a Melbourne only rocking uh, battle, then it probably would have happened by now. I mean, there's nobody stopping anybody from creating what you want to see. So I just wanted to speak on my behalf from my experience judging and participating and being around all the tournaments. I feel like it's working out just fine for us, but maybe just getting that history part a little more accurate. That way, we can will not confuse them, and when people put it in their captions or the hashtags, it won't confuse people. Like you're calling this something that it's not, and I feel like we're still missing some evidence. But on the aspect of tournaments and all that, I feel like it's pretty much working for us here so far.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parts of history that are like there's no information to be found, or it's like really really difficult to actually find what is that happened, and then interpreting right, it's another thing, because like we might have some videos or like some text or like old like newspaper or like a vlog, like an interview, like a written interview, but if you are not there to like actually like see people or someone who's like literally in a video saying this and that and showing and having like dates, it's very very difficult. And and yeah, actually I think we have to take both things with the same importance of paying attention to history, to what has been done and how we got here, and also like being aware that we are the ones in this generation, and people that come after us will look back to also what we did. So we're also part of the history, and we also have to make it. And actually, having this kind of like spaces where everybody talks, I think it's the best way we can actually make history like all together, not just have like one or two people decide and just like push everybody to a direction where nobody actually like agreed on in the first place. So I think we have to like pay attention to what has been done, and also pay attention to what can we do to actually like write a history that we are proud of, that pays respect to what has been done before, but also that is good for us and for future generations. Because there's a lot of things that have not been good for this generation. Like for example, like keeping history. It was hard, but it's hard to find a lot of stuff, and that is a problem now. And probably some people like didn't sit like that to talk. Obviously now it's easier because we have internet, but still like now I think we are aware of what not having a clear history or like having all the community on board can lead to, and we should like everybody move forward together. So yeah, it's a good point about like focusing on what can we do in the tournaments, because it's what drives most of attention pretty much right now. So yeah, Alejop is also on the stage, so you can you can join.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angel. I'm talking about the community in Montreal. I'm going to give a little bit of context of how we organize the events here in Montreal and why we are the way we are, basically, of the discipline I got in Venezuela. So, just to give you a little bit of context, um, we started since the beginning as we were young. There was no raves in Venezuela. There was no clubs open to electronic music because usually it's more reggaeton and those stuff, Latin music. But we started battling in the street. We started battling to be the best in those moments. I'm talking about 2008, 2009. So we were growing in this scene of competition, and for me it's nothing new. Well, how I perceive my experience, maybe for you guys is new, but I grew up in this environment, and for me it was always like that. Not to be the best because we were young and people change their mind a lot and be open to what is new. So for me, cutting shapes after I stopped for a couple of years, and we organized tournaments in Venezuela. We always keep everything separate. It was mostly Melbourne. Cutting shapes didn't pop out in that moment. We stopped actually stopping doing shuffle because of LMFAO. We felt attack. I know it's like a story for everyone, or maybe not. Uh, I know it got popularity because of that, but for us, wasn't like an attack. It was like people mocking on us dancing shuffle. So we didn't feel identified anymore, and we just changed the style of freestyle. But that's not the subject, okay? So basically, we still organize events. We win a lot of competition um, individually and as a group. And unfortunately, because of the bad security, I would say, I don't know how I can say a word for that. There's no words for that that I came in my head, but there's a lot of thief and people that robs you in Venezuela. So I got those videos in a hard drive and it got stolen. But at least I have proof that there's pictures related to those tournaments. And it was very underground. Venezuela is Latin America, so it was 2009, 2008. We didn't have too much content related to videos and what's been happening. Maybe some of you know Umbriel or Zeta from the capital. Anyway, the subject is that I was with them, but when they started, we just switched the style to another one. My point is that discipline we got of the street dance, or well, I know shuffle is a rave dance, but as I said, my experience as a shuffler started in the street, no raves nor anything. So we put this discipline here in Montreal as if we are doing something and we love something, we have to be 100% with information, with everything. Not to me, but just ask question if you're interested. If you came to party or just chill, you're still welcome. But we're not gonna, you know what I mean. We're not gonna take it seriously and be open to party people because maybe people can come and just chill and party. We will welcome them and teach them or show them their what is the dance, but we want to keep it further. My point is that we keep these two categories separate, cutting chips and Melbourne, because of that. People know what they do, okay? And I'm happy that in Montreal now is solid related to what is what, right? They know that it's shuffle, but for me, it's different. Like what I was agree with Kento, what he posed of, these two dances are different, even if they're like together, connected in a way, but that's what we do during meetups. We let people put their music whatever we want, like they want. They can put hundreds of music. They're free to do whatever they want. But we are dancers, so we don't have to be, strong in one genre. If you're a shaper, you can dance on hardstyle. I know for some people it's impossible, but it's possible because free step is a fast um, footwork base, and there's shapes that you can do combos and keep up with it. Well, Kento was an example. He posed, videos doing super high BPM, doing shapes and everything. So maybe for some people, people have different bodies, different weight, different, um, stamina. So I guess like if you train, if you lab, if you try out new stuff, you will be able to uh, control those stuff. So there's no excuses. It's just limiting yourself of what you can do. So I think everything is possible if you believe it, and I think this is the way we are gonna work for a very while. I hope to meet you guys in the future. I hope to travel soon. I'm doing my passport to be able to see you in the competitions and everything. And for whatever I have my experience, I'm trying to be always innovating and keep, updating myself of what I know and send the best information I can give to my community and be all in one page basically. There's no one better than anyone, and I think my conclusion of this is if you guys want to um, like choose the judges, I think you should. I know it's not like that, okay? What I'm gonna say, maybe for some people will misunderstand what I'm gonna say, but it's not like that. I think you should dig down deep on whoever is organizing to people that are not listening. Example is me, or it can be anyone else. Maybe people will be identified with me that have a lot of knowledge or are well grounded of how we started and could be a good option to judge too. So I guess you guys don't know me because I didn't pop out for a very while, but I think it's the moment to speak, and I really appreciate what you guys did. That I can give this information. I'm open to any updates that maybe I don't know, or maybe I know and I can relate with you guys, but um, I hope that we can find a solution and participate more outside. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And Montreal is happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you for sharing your story in Venezuela and also Montreal. And is there anybody else in the audience who want to hop in and share a little bit of their community, or if the recent events are like bringing discussions up or just like conversation within the community, or if there's something that worries you, you can like raise the hand and we'll invite you to the stage. And if not, we'll just like keep moving forward with related to some of the stuff said, like battles, judges, teaching. So yeah, if anybody wants to share something from their specific community, feel free to raise the hand.
I think what many are experiencing today, I've also experienced before because I think people's knowledge of the shuffle community and how it has developed is limited to their teacher and or by also what they see online. So I think there's been a lot of things happening in the history of our community that have been established, but also need to be figured out, and kind of touching on what Lefty said as well. Once we start to lay out these facts, I think we'll be able to move forward with a better understanding of all sides. And I first-handedly experienced this sort of like identity crisis that many are experiencing right now. I don't like make fun of it because it did trigger me back in like 2021. I had like this crazy identity crisis. So like the YouTube videos of the Spanish and the American dancers, mainly speaking of like Gabby J. David, Mark Tor, these were the dancers that I was learning from in my first few years of my shuffle journey. And these videos were titled Cutting Shapes Combos, Cutting Shapes Choreography, and then in parentheses, Shuffle Dance. And of course, at this time, there was little to no information online if shapes was shuffling or what shuffling even was and where it came from. And so I really do appreciate like pages like the Shuffle Timeline with Luva and Gara being like one of the main leaders, being in charge of uh, the resources and information being posted there. And continuing in 2021, I was actually invited to the second edition of Shuffle Wisdom that was run by Jolie Anastasia. And I was invited to be an instructor to teach Shapes Masterclass. And that was actually my first experience where I learned in real life that hundreds of shufflers in the US danced completely different from me. I was like, what am I? um, I was like, wait, am I just a shaper or like, am I shuffling? Like, what is going on here? And so I really had to like set my ego and pride aside. I started to learn from all sorts of different shufflers in the scene. And I promised myself to be a lifelong student in dance. And after many, many years of traveling and learning and understanding, I think I realized that I had no knowledge of the foundations of the Melbourne Shuffle, which today I believe is the Ready Man T-step as the foundational steps. And many in the US shuffle scene have used that as a guide for them in the development of their own style of shuffle. And at the same time, I believe many others had little to zero knowledge of the foundations of the Melbourne Shuffle and learned from people in person and online and by watching videos where the style looked different. And some might even say that it was shapy. And I know there's a conversation of like, oh, we're more like a hybrid. But yeah, I just wanted to speak on my experience of that I too have experienced this kind of like identity crisis with this whole topic of if shaping is shuffling or is everything under the umbrella term of shuffling.
Go on, Luva.
My internet is a little bit unstable. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the compliments, Kento, and for everyone else. I don't know if many of you here that started in around 17, 18. No, Kento was saying that, but my internet was a little bit unstable. Do you know why, in the first place, this discussion of shape shuffling started? You can write on the text conversation over here, but most of you here know how this began. This is a question that
So I actually started around that time, and I can give you an idea of what my perspective was because I, as a shuffler, came in being inspired by Elena. And as many of you know, if you've studied Elena's step, she calls it obviously shuffling, and back then I would have called it shuffling as well. But she mixes other styles like house, for example. And then at the time, other videos started to get viral from like Spain and things like that, which you guys were also calling it shuffling. So the mixture of between like the US and Spain calling it shuffling, it created what we now call hybrid. So this is where the mixture started. It all goes back to viral videos and what people is calling what, if that answers your question, Luva.
Yes, it's partially that. It's partially that. Just a little quick review for everyone else. Gara and I are reviewing our next post will be Cutting Ships Part 1. We had some other in front of that, but due to the circumstances, we will release something this one earlier. But basically, many of you here know that Cutting Ships from London, from England. Back then, they already called the footwork that they did as shuffling, and curry shapes was something there. It was something towards more of how the whole body moves, the creating shapes with their body. So it was like synonyms, sort of speak. Shuffling was part of shapes or something those lines, but once once this dance, the UK shuffle, house shuffle, London shuffle, they had several names, and cutting shapes all of them were synonyms, started to go to YouTube. And the people in Netherlands as well, they changed the name of the dance to Konijnendans as some kind of joke slash hate towards the people that were dancing in techno events. All these videos, alongside videos from Melbourne Shuffle styles, sub-styles, were on YouTube, on compilations. This is where all this trouble began. Me and Gara believe that if since the beginning in the UK parties, the English call it cutting shape since the beginning, all of this that is happening since then would not happen. Probably would not happen, but since the word shuffling were used to both and people online starting to make these compilations, it start to get too much confused. And this is something that me as someone who study all rave dances since 2010, more specifically 2014 when I entered the dance university, I start to notice it. Documentation of all rave dances or electronic dances or post-internet dances, many names, but all of them have some share features. All of them have some very poor documentation. People online don't know where they came from. And shuffling has this problem, shuffling or shapes, both of them, or the same thing, again, have this problem. And this is something that we on the timeline, we are trying to fix these problems to provide the people from the community as much trustworthy as possible. We don't want to be the owners of truth. We don't want to say, no, this is the real history, because in all dance history in general, a real truth does not exist. So we are trying to at least give people as much trustworthy documentation and to pay attention to the details, because nowadays we created so much information on social media, and this is something that we always raise to people. Back up your things and talk to everyone else. Back up your videos, because we don't know in how much years some other social media will appear, and all the videos from what we are doing right now will be lost, and all these problems start to get this endless loop. So yeah, it's pretty much it. If the English start to use just only cutting shapes at the beginning, and people doing compilations online only use cutting shapes in the videos, probably none of this would happen. But it will be in another multiverse that happens.
So yeah, I just want to share my opinion, or like the way I recognized the whole changes through all the years with the shuffle, because like I danced for like over 11 years right now, and I would say I'm too young for the real OG Melbourne shuffle, like in this direction, but way too old for like the generations that started with the hype at 2016 and 17. And like I said, the only thing I had as like foundation, or like the options I have to learn this dance, was YouTube. So you only had like a lot of compilations and stuff like this, and you learned this dance back in the days like from other dancers you met through raves, scenes, and everything. So the way how you approached the dance, what kind of information you got, and how it's got handled was totally different, and you were like a little bit of a weirdo if you danced it outside of these scenes like the raves or everything else. It was like you directly noticed like the difference of each country. So if you had Russians, you definitely know, okay, this is like the Russian shuffle, this is like the Malaysian style, this is like the Californian shuffle and the Melbourne stuff and everything. And a lot of people I talk with and that tell me like what kind of feeling they got about this is that they feel like at first, like, people go on Instagram, look up for shuffle, go on YouTube and look up for shuffle, and it's not about like the dance and the videos we got. So the first thing is you see most of the time at the beginning it was girls with not so much clothes and everything, and I don't want to open this topic too much, but I guess you know what kind of videos I think about. And they got a little bit disappointed because like we put so much work in it and barely got seen about this. And now random people do like 3-4 steps calling it shuffle, even if it's not like the basement we know from the Melbourne stuff and everything, and get millions of views and everything. And for most of the people, also for me included, it was not about the hate about the dance itself. It was more about the idea and the vibe you get of the community that is behind that, because you have the feeling it's not about the dance, it's only because of the fame and all about the likes and just to be seen. And this was, I guess, the most and biggest part why people get a little bit disappointed and mad about this whole situation, and also have difficulties to fit in like the new stuff and get the information about this dance, because it's completely different. People record videos on a different way. The platforms, the social media platforms where you get the informations are completely different. Now you have Instagram and everything, and you have like other options now. And it was very hard to get in touch with like the other communities, or especially with the cutting shape community and stuff with like this. And I guess a lot of this was part of the big discussion and the big misinformation that followed after this over the years. And for me, like I said, it's very hard to say these are completely different dances, because they kind of got a very similar like history and stuff like this. And also the part that cutting shape was also like called shuffle in the very beginning and stuff like this. But I mean, it's the only style or sub-genre that is called differently. We have like Malaysian shuffle, we have Russian shuffle and everything, and cutting shape is like cutting shape. So it's got a diversity also, or starting with a name. And people needs just to know the difference and start to make the difference very clear, and showing like the real informations about each dance, not calling stuff randomly like they want because they got no information. And that's my little point of view.
Yeah, I think the name shuffling being used for a lot of feet movement, like just like footwork, that is where your feet do not separate from the ground, is something that, and a term that has brought a lot of confusion, like throughout like the whole time we have been trying to like look back and learn what was done, whether it was like the UK or Australia, and that even like that sparked a lot of confusion like in me too. Like I was looking back and just said like, oh, they said they were shuffling, so like this is shuffling. So, but a good question that it has been raised in other like Discord calls with like in the Spanish community call we had, was like, so like what is shuffling, like, because many people use it for different like the terminology is used for different things. So for some, shuffling is used for the style that was consolidated in Melbourne, and then all the substyles where it like branches from the Melbourne, like consolidation of the shuffle style, where the stomping was starting to be a big part of it. Because before like the consolidation of the Melbourne style, stomping was not like a very like big element and present thing in what was called shuffling. It was mostly just like shuffling the feet without lifting, so it didn't come from the stomp. like in the really in the early times, when if we see like some old videos in the UK where like some people see like, oh, they're doing like shuffle footwork, or we've seen some like texts where people say that some people uh, from Australia learned some stuff from the Brits, but they say it didn't come from the stomp. So shuffle is something like a term that is used for Melbourne and what it comes after, and that branches off from Melbourne. Some people use the shuffle to like as a term, like as an umbrella term that has inside like everything that falls under is all the styles that evolve in a way coming from this like shuffling of the feet in the raves, so they put in the cunny shapes, all the shuffle and the sub styles, since there's other styles that also kind of like got some stuff from like the shuffling and developed another style like free step or like sereno or hard step. Like there's people who put all of those as sub styles of shuffling, and for them shuffling is just a like a general term where a lot of styles fall under. So I think this is also something that is gonna be like, I think it's gonna be very hard to have everyone also come to an agreement of what is shuffling, because it's very ingrained in different cultures, and for some communities saying shuffle includes more stuff. So for some others it's just the Melbourne branch. For here in Spain it has been like for so long shuffle and shapes, like to me specifically, for example, not like free step and all those stuff, but for specific people it does, and I think it's like a really interesting conversation, that too. Not only like, because I think everybody can see how Melbourne shuffle and cutting shapes are different styles. Like I think nobody thinks they're like like the same as like a sub style of like what could be like what comes from the like the foot shuffling originally in the raves. But yeah, like what do we use shuffle for? Like as a general term, as just the part that comes after Melbourne, and because as Adrian said, within the shuffle you see like the Russian shuffle, Melbourne shuffle, Cali shuffle, Malaysian shuffle, and cutting shapes. It's not like the London shuffle. But still, even if it was the London shuffle, probably would have like the difference you can see it, and me as someone who has been like who's learned how to cut shapes 7 years ago and shuffling for 10 years, I even if I had everything under the term shuffling, I could like clearly see the differences within the substyles and know what elements are from both, and then also being capable of mixing them and like have my shuffle part or my Melbourne, whatever you want to call it, part nurtured from the shapes, and also the shapes nurtured from the other part. And I think a lot of people who are like this like hybrid of shuffling shapes as a dancer, it's really important to like acknowledge all of this stuff that happens.
I agree. I think it all just kind of comes down to what type of shuffler you decide to be, and that's just that.
I kind of wanted to add a little bit on this because, yeah, hybrid is not necessary. Like you can dance as many styles as you want, but if you want to improve to be like an overall skilled dancer, you have to, I guess, like stick to one style. And unfortunately, that's hard for a lot of people who in our community consider themselves hybrid. And interesting enough, like I would consider myself one if you so unquote like want to base it off like how many styles do you like dab into. But if I want to improve as like a Melbourne shuffler, then I stick to like that style. Or if I want to improve as a cutting shape shuffler, then I improve into that style. When it comes to like if we wanted to like categorize the competitions and things like that, unless like hybrid shufflers want to make their own competition, and you can throw whatever like rave footwork style you want in there, we could do that too. But as of right now, for like what we're discussing and things like that, yeah, we'll have to have like Melbourne one category and then Shapes one category.
Hi, I want to hop up to say that if you guys want to organize events that are separate, like cutting chips and Melbourne, let me tell you that it perfectly works. It actually works, and I can tell you that it will be successful. Just try it out once. If it doesn't work, it's okay, but I'm sure 100% that it will work. If it work in Montreal and we are not super like Omega big community, I'm sure it's gonna work there in Spain or whoever in the United States. I also want to say something related to the instructors. You know, about the people that are new, there's always information on YouTube or people around you that have a lot of experience. Just ask questions and people will help you. But if you don't do that, then you will misinform people, and it will have misinformation around the community or the scene of shuffle. Back then it was only YouTube, and the only way to learn it was analyzing and repeating the video over and over and over again. There was no slow motion, there was anything related to that. Just asking or commenting on the comments to talk in private or whatever, whoever it is that you saw shuffling in the video. But now everything is easier. We have instructors now. We have people that are out there on internet. There's a lot of information. Now there's names of moves. Before it was just the foundations. There was no. I didn't know the Gallo was a name for shuffle after the years. So I guess like if you uh want information, all is there. And I actually want to say something about my experience, how I know about coding shapes. As you remember, I just said that I stopped after I moved to Canada. I moved to Canada and then I stopped for 4 years. But I was never out of the scene. I was literally living in YouTube. I was always watching videos of shuffle, looking for shuffle, new compilations, new dancers to get inspiration from. So I never saw anything until 2016 or 15 that I saw the first video of coding shapes of a girl doing it on a rave. So I was like, what is this new or bad executed free step? But it was back then. I didn't know anything about it. So, oh, I'm sorry with that. I'm sorry. But yeah, I just wanted to say that from my experience, how I found out about shapes, I know is completely different, and I update myself with information. But this is just my experience, how I found out about this dance, which is cutting shapes. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Please, just for the people that are new in shuffle, just ask questions. Everything is there. If you really want to teach shuffle and inform people, just ask questions, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. There was something said in the chat from Jay Cargius. I will read it just in case someone missed it. She said, "From Mark Torres' classes, I've learned the essence of shuffling has three parts: stomp, shuffling the feet, and microbounce. So this is how we differentiate the style from other dance styles. Is there also the essence that describes cutting shapes? Because now what I've heard is that cutting shapes actually refers to the movement of the upper body. So what I can say about that, I don't know about Mark teaching this class, but I do know that I started referring as like these elements that you said as shuffle lessons back in 2021 when I did like an intensive like the shuffle level up week, and I was thinking that every time all the time people talk about like steps in shuffling being the foundation, and they are the way like with this technique we do like show the foundation, but there is something else within the steps that differentiates shuffle from other styles. So, for example, in hip hop or house, they also have the running man. Actually, a running man is a step that comes from hip hop. But what does a running man in shuffling make it shuffling? You know, because like the step is the same, but there has to be something that other styles don't do. And to me, this is the emphasis on the stomping. And if we look back at history, we can see that the Melbourne shuffle actually consolidated as a style when putting more importance to the stomp and actually bringing putting importance to this part as they shuffle the feet at the same time the stomp. And with the running man technique and the T-step technique, this is how you bring these two things together. This is just things I've been like thinking over time, in the last years, and something that it makes sense to me. It doesn't need to make sense for the rest, but it definitely is something that makes sense to me and something that differentiates shuffling from other styles, like having this importance to the stomping and also like just shuffling your feet across like the space and navigate the space. And back in the day I was teaching it with these three parts: stomp, like feet shuffling, dragging, however you want to call it, and hopping. And I would also talk about running man, T-step, and Charleston. And I was doing that because I had also shapes within like the shuffle movement. Like I was treating everything like in there, and me giving a lot of importance to the hopping, having like this, giving the style like more like a higher like groove, like up in the air instead of like being more grounded. And also a lot of like Charleston presence is something that just made more sense to actually like kind of like justify more of like having shapes within shuffling. And that is something that I see as inaccurate right now. And I think that the combination of stomp and shuffling the feet is what, with the running man and T-step and also navigating the space, is what creates this like strong foundation in Melbourne. And I think that when we like shuffle or like specify in like Melbourne or other styles that came after Melbourne, we put a lot of importance to the stomp. And whether in shapes, we do also have stomp, but we could do a whole like cutting shapes round without stomping and without having this like groove that comes from the stomp. And actually hopping becomes something very important in shapes. And even if in shuffling we do a lot of hopping to like remove friction or navigate the space, like just go and navigate bigger spaces with a T-step, for example, because like the space we have just pivoting is limited, but if we hop we can actually cover more space. It's an element, but I wouldn't say it's something like foundational. It's like a good technique or something that helps us. But yeah, I'm just like throwing like thoughts that I have about like styles and foundations in general. And cutting shapes foundation is still yet to be defined. Like I think if you would ask around the world to many like shapers, not even like Melbourne Shuffle, like shapers, what is the foundation? Like you could see some common elements, but nobody would agree or like have the same answer or like a 90% like accurate answer like everybody. So I think the cutting shapes foundation is something that is being discussed within the community, and it's something that we have to figure out because it needs to be set, because so we can teach this like style or sub style, if someone considers it whatever, within shuffling. Because if not, the style's not gonna progress that much or grow because it has no foundation that where you can like build on top of. So that's a little bit of like my take, that stomping and feet shuffling is part of like the Melbourne and like shuffle part, and hopping is used, but it's not as important as the stomp. Like to me, stomping at the same time that you shuffle your feet is like a big thing. So if someone who's like here on the stage wants to like add or share thoughts about that, I think it would be very interesting, because like foundation is the main topic why I started like separating them again, like as styles.
I want to add to that as well, because competitively, you can't necessarily judge cutting shapes with Melbourne Foundation. And that's where you get a lot of confused people where are going and joining this competition and They don't know why they didn't pass prelims. They don't know why they went against someone and they lost, you know. It's not being judged fairly when you have judges who have the idea of like, oh, we're judging this based off Melbourne Foundation. But realistically, if we treat it as a different style, then we should be judging it based on that foundation. So
I have a lot to say actually. May I start?
Yeah.
I'm reading here the, I can't say comments. I don't know if I may say these comments. Yeah. Some minutes ago we were talking about including free step and Sarino and some other rave dances as well as part of shuffling. I don't know too much about this because historically they are different, although shuffling influenced some of its development. They goes to different directions. Jump style included. Jump style is a completely different rave dance, and I would honestly suggest you to not include everyone here. Do not include jump style as part of shuffling because its whole history and movement set is much more different. It's another rave dance on its own. Second, for this topic of foundation, and from what I read from the comments, because obviously I am not in US, I'm not in Spain. Although I really want to go to these countries, it's financially impossible to meet yet. But from reading that, and pay attention for what happened in TSL, for example, I think that one of the greatest things that pretty much this discussion and all the rest should address is these foundations of shuffling, because again, historically speaking, the foundations were kind of mixed years ago. So for many people, shapes in shuffling is the same thing, or for many people, shapes use the foundations of Melbourne Shuffle. And historically, when people say shuffling, people say all the sub-styles from Melbourne Shuffle. So I want to give some suggestions here for the people present. This is something that Gara and I were discussing some weeks ago, and I want to give suggestions to you. First would be try to find a proper, not like defining things is not like 100% is bad sometimes, but try to really set the difference between both styles. Like to me, Melbourne Shuffle and all the other sub styles are running man T shuffle and use space. Lots of horizontal space, hover left and right. You need to use the space in Melbourne Shuffle and all the other sub styles. To me, shapes is more vertical. It's more vertical, Polly Pocket, Charleston, a much more uplifting thing, not towards ground. Melbourne Shuffle, it's more towards ground, it's stomping, as Marbiik said. And regarding that topic is all the competitive side of things. The moment that these foundations of shaping could be described, I would say this. The thing that Gara and I were thinking: if you are going to, for example, a Melbourne Shuffle or sub-styles competition, sub-styles battle, etc., would be like have some kind of percentage of what you could add in your round. For example, if you start, this is something that I read a lot of comments, and this is what I'm trying to raise. Lots of people adding a lot of other dance styles to the round, and sometimes the foundations do not appear properly. You could be like give like a percentage, half of your round should be doing foundations, other half you should improvise or add other styles. This is something. And then to finish my comments, I think it would be interesting if some of you that have an active scene like try to do these experiments of different competitions. Like in an event, you have the Melbourne Shuffle and all the sub styles part and shapes part. Have this division happen. And if you start to doing one another in the other round and vice versa, you start losing points again. Because this is what people are complaining too much, and TSL and other competitions in the US we are noticing that is because there are so much things affecting each other, and people start to get, okay, but what is prioritized more? Is more creativity, is more foundation? This happened with free step here in Brazil, and I'll discuss that with Garo sometimes ago. Again, just giving suggestions because I'm noticing that it's affecting a lot of the competitive scene, and for a lot of people, from what we are reading, the competitive side of shuffling now is extremely important. So again, maybe trial and error and defining some more better definitions and where this thing started and then that ended might help. But I think experiment things should be a way to see if all this could end well, I would say.
May I? Okay. So for me personally, first off, I just want to say thank you everyone for being here, doing the community service, doing your local community service as far as being a part of this conversation. Secondly, I'm glad we're talking about battling. I think guidelines need to be set into place. I had an instance on my prior battle where I didn't know I had the option to stop the battle due to musical error. So these are an example of guidelines that need to be taught within the community and also within the foundations of battling as well. Just wanted to toss that one out there.
I have a question. Like when, how do I word this? Like if we're in like a Melbourne only section of a tournament, when does like our dance start being creativity if we're dabbling in another style, and then stop being creativity if it's going to be like docked? Because sometimes there's buildups where like for half of your round you're having to throw in some contemporary or throw in some other type of movement that could be viewed as another style, even if you don't even know it's another style, it could be viewed as one. So I'm just wondering when it like jumps into creativity and is added to the points of your round, or when it's just like you're kind of just not doing what the section of the tournament is.
So I have an input on that, and I think this again circles back to foundation. Is like how strong is your foundation, and how creative can you be with it enough to evolve it, but still keep it foundational within that style. You can have like the example of like the build-up, for example, and like let's say you have another style that it's upper body, like very strong upper body wise. If you're able to combine that with a solid Melbourne foundation, that should not be discounted against you because you've already proven that you have a solid, strong foundation within that style, if that makes sense. But if you that's what it can be a slippery slope. There's a very thin line because if you throw too much of another style, then now your round is not well rounded enough to be qualified for that style that you're competing in.
True. Okay. Agreed.
And sorry, Lefty, but I'm gonna throw you out there. So like the TSL, for example, like I believe he personally lost against Cain because he might have gotten lost in the sauce within his round with the other extra stuff that he does. And this is like not against him or anything, because but anyways, like that's an example as to like you can be very well rounded dancer within many styles, but if you lose focus of what you want to throw within a round on a categorized competition, then that can be counted against you.
True.
I kind of want to add. I have some things to say. So, hi, y'all. First of all, I did miss a big chunk, so forgive me if this has been covered because I did have to step out. But I wanted to circle on separating battles by different substyles. And if the battle is going to be a shuffle battle, would that encompass Melbourne? Would it encompass Moss? Would it encompass Cali, but just not cutting shapes? Because when I look at the foundation of Moss, like specifically the T step in Moss is a very different feeling than the T step of like a Melbourne shuffle. And so then I wonder how, in a battle aspect, if it's just labeled as a shuffle battle, how you would determine the foundation when the steps look completely different and have a different feeling.
I think it's important to know while we have this discussion that a style is not defined by one singular step or even a few steps, right? Like time to time, people will say like, "Oh, I see this diagonal heels running man or poly pocket, whatever you want to call it." It's seen in Malaysian style. It's seen in hip hop, even. It's seen in house dancing. I've taken many classes. I've seen a lot of videos. A lot of the steps that we use, Charleston Running Man, is used in other dance styles. So while we're figuring out what is the foundations of shuffle, the foundations of shapes, or is it even worth differentiating, it's important to look beyond just the steps. Because of course, if you just did one step, that doesn't define a style. But it's the feeling, the grooves, the foundational elements. Of course, it's worth noting because in the chat as well, even between house and shapes, we share a lot of the same footwork. And what makes it different for me is the feeling and the groove. In the house dance community, it's defined and established that there is a groove called the jack that makes it house dancing that is not seen in other dance styles, especially with shapes. And while we continue this discussion, I wanted to note that hopefully we're all on the same page when we're referring to shuffle and shapes. It's how we see it today and not how we see it back in the 1980s or the 1990s. When we're speaking on the foundations, we're talking about how we see it today. So there's no confusion there.
So, how would we be able to preserve the history that's documented um, while also evolving with how the style has changed?
I think it comes down to us, like the dancers. We're the current generation, and we have to figure it out. And maybe like there's nothing to figure out. We just have to like keep dancing and just acknowledge what we do and like study. And actually the way we evolve as dancers will dictate like naturally how the dance will like change. I've always seen that like focusing only on the steps is not the best way to like they are important, steps are important, but steps can be found and can be shared among many like dance styles. So actually focus on specific moves or talking about like, oh, just like this moves or these moves. It's can be partly like missing important stuff, because for example, as it's mentioned about shapes, there's like the shape shifting concept or like main element, which is like change a shape that your body like does to another one, and that this is no particular step, but it's something essential to the cutting shapes. And this is no like running man or like footwork or like lock or hip twist, whatever. It's just shape shifting is like an idea, is like a concept, that is like something like super important. And I think when it comes to events, like it's very important that people don't get caught up on like, oh, it's like if there starts being separated competitions, it's not that in a Melbourne round you can't throw any like shapes footwork. You just have to be aware of what is the competition you signed up in, and like there's gonna be like some foundation. And as shufflers, we have worked in the foundation, and people who has done shapes also has worked in the foundation and the upper body groove and the shape shifting and all this stuff. So and there's still gonna be like competitions where it's combined. I think that the topic of like maintaining the foundation is very important. And just because you happen to throw just like a couple of footwork or like a spin or groove that is not like grounded, I think it won't be seen as like, oh, you did like 1.5 seconds of like not shuffling, like points out. I think the all the overall context of a round is what will give like the context of what are you doing. I think that's very important. And it's also important to know that there's a lot of creativity that can be put on top of the foundation, or just like trying to like starting from the foundation, build creativity and actually create from the foundation, not trying to only put another style on top of it, because that becomes like you're doing one style with your like feet, for example, and another like upper body style, like Leonette was saying, and that is like completely valid. But there's like so many ways. There's not a limited amount of ways where we can get creative, and there's actually a lot of stuff that we can do with shuffling, and a lot of stuff we can figure and learn from just paying attention to the steps we're already doing and asking ourselves more questions about the things we already have been doing for years, but we don't question them. We just like do them. We can actually see it and just look at them, and there's so much to learn, and that we can also like just break down and learn and start like being creative. So I think that judges also will play a big role in, they have to be people who are really active and working on the style and studying the style. If it's like and if it's like a merge tournament, even more, because they need to be, if possible, well versed in both styles, because that is where it gets more difficult. I think it's like easier to just judge a competition where it's only shapes or where it's only Melbourne, other than a tournament like TSL, where we can see there's hybrid, a lot of hybrid dancers and a lot of rounds that probably have like shuffling, have like shapes. So yeah, it comes down to us studying the style and sharing a lot between us, because in Spain we have done a lot of creativity within shuffling and within shapes too, that it's totally different than the creativity that can be done in the US or Russia or like Colombia or whatever other country. And we need to share this when we are together, not only like dance and have fun, which is like very important, but also have dance sessions where we share why how do we get to where we to when we dance, because unless we spend time sharing this, we'll just see the result, and we won't see and or try to understand the creative processes of like different communities and people. And I think this is something very important to push the style and progress the style. And unless we share this, there's like we're still gonna be like kind of like stuck in this like creativity um, moment, and only seeing or only trying to find things in other styles to just add on and not to like actually expand what we have, because other styles have expanded what they have. At the beginning, the other styles were also like kind of like simple, and I'm not saying shuffle is simple, but you see how hip hop or house were danced before, and you see it now, and you see the growth. And I like shuffle has a lot to like grow.
I have another question. And I also don't know if this has been covered yet, but kind of going back to cutting shapes and how is being said that it should be separated, it should be its own style that is not a part of shuffling. I wonder how that ties in with the history in the UK prior to when cutting shapes even became a term. So, in like these talks and these conversations, are we just looking at cutting shapes from when that term was introduced and how it evolved? Because it did evolve from them shuffling in the UK. And prior to that term even being incepted, they always referred to themselves as shufflers. And if you look at the videos of how they used to get down back in the UK, you can see similar foundations. You can see, in my opinion, a similar feeling to that of the Melbourne Shuffle. Um, so I wonder in these conversations if we're just going from the time period of when cutting shapes became a term, or if we're also counting in the history that happened in the UK prior to that.
So I got something to add to that, and I think every time I hear people talk about whether like cutting shapes, different style or not, like yeah, we can agree that even if it started in the UK, like even if Melbourne never existed, we can agree that cutting shapes currently does not look like the UK shuffle. And that to me is an indicator that it should be its own thing and it should be celebrated as so. That's all I gotta say.
May I answer that?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. By the way, Kat, I think in the just to disqualify something. I think the Running Man in Shuffling post you've asked something regarding black people in UK, and I don't know if you deleted that comment or so. But anyway, we will address a lot of that in our next post, and we are looking much more deeper into that history. I think that it matters to you a lot, matters to us a lot. So just to clarify, we are paying attention to that. Okay. Now, talking the question, the thing. Could you repeat the question again? I lost my thoughts. I Lionette as well. Please, I lost
I
my
guess
thoughts.
the question is when we're having these discussions about separating out cutting shapes as its own style, even separating it out from a battle aspect. Um, are we only looking from the timeline of when cutting shapes became a term, or are we also counting in the UK shufflers and how it even evolved to become cutting shapes? Because I do agree with you, Lionette. That's why I think that there's truth in both sides. Like if you do look at cutting shapes now, yeah, it looks very, very different from Melbourne shuffling, from even the UK style of shuffling. But if you look from where it evolved, this is just to me why I think that it should still fall under the same umbrella, because it did evolve from being shuffling. They always referred to themselves as shufflers until the term cutting shapes became a thing. So then I question in evolving, pushing forward, and finding a best solution for all, if we're only going to be looking at the timeline from when cutting shapes became a term, or if we're also going to like credit the history that came in the UK before that.
So like you can
That
be
makes sense.
inspired by a dance style that was called something, and you don't necessarily have to carry the same name with it, which is what's happening. Like, yeah, you can honor its roots and where it came from, but also still like understand or be aware that it's something different.
Can you be aware that it's different and have it still be under the same umbrella? Because I think that had been at least the understanding for a little bit, that there's shuffling and then you have these different substyles underneath: Cali, Moss, Malaysian. I said that twice. Cali, Moss, Melbourne, and then it would be cutting shapes. So it was still acknowledging that yes, this is a different style, but that it came from the same place.
Um, I'm still not sure how exactly to like go into that, because I've tried to look at it as it coming from the same umbrella, but then the music is what plays a big part as to why I might think otherwise, and why it might just fall under a rave dance umbrella rather than a shuffle umbrella. Because you can put like the other shuffle styles as an example, and the music that we dance to, it's like as like Melbourne shufflers, they can all pretty much go. They're all hyper B, and they go back to the same foundations, just performed differently. But when it comes to shapes, not only are you dancing to like different genres, and the music is also highlighted different with a different style of dance that doesn't necessarily goes back to like being grounded and using T-step, you know?
I considered this is something that we do want to. We considered the Melbourne Shuffle branch and the cutting shapes branch as the same with the same seed, with the same root, which is how the UK people were dancing in the 80s. So for a bigger perspective, is cutting shape shuffling? In that answer, yes, it is. That in this sense, it came from the same place. Yes, it is. However, for a lot of people on internet, and that happened earlier than LMFAO, because LMFAO was a big break in this thought. For a lot of people, when they say I shuffle, they are referring to the all Melbourne Shuffle brain part sub-styles. And I think this is the discussion that a lot of people were doing in the last 8 years. Is shape shuffling in the sense of is shape part of the Melbourne Shuffle sub-styles? No, it is not. But in a bigger historical sense, it is, because they both branched from the same piece, from the same part, which is the UK raves in the 80s and 90s. I don't know if I answered your question properly.
Kind of.
Kind of.
I also was trying to read the chat. I don't know how y'all are able to multitask. I just said it in the chat, but I'll like go look and then be listening and my brain is like, ah. But
So I'm going to add on
I lost
to
my train of thought.
that's all right. So Catherine raises a really good question about cutting
Indeed.
shapes, right? And so I'm going to touch a little bit on the history that I've done myself and also speaking with Luva. Just so everyone knows, this is based off of our research and we're trying to be as accurate as possible. Maybe there's some inaccuracies, maybe not, but I'm going to
There's
read what
always
I...
inaccuracies, but we always try to fix them over time.
Yes, we're here to live and learn. So, when comparing where shuffling started, around the mid-1980s in the UK, where it was referred as dropfoot, and later known as UK Shuffle in 2011 to 2015, and then in Melbourne, Australia, where it was referred to stomping, late 1980s to late 1990s, and later known as the Melbourne Shuffle, early 2000s, to the present. I believe they were in fact shuffling in both places. At this point, we were all shuffling. Then development happened. The term cutting shapes emerged in the early 2010s as another way to refer them dancing UK Shuffle. So both terms, UK Shuffle, London Shuffle, cutting shapes, were used synonymously. In the early 2010s, the Melbourne Shuffle had more development with other styles such as Malaysian, Cali, Russian style to emerge. Running Man and T-step, or more accurately T-shuffle, became largely known as the foundational steps amongst the styles developed from Melbourne, Australia. It's a style and was another term to refer as dancing or shuffling, which later became, in recent years, turned into a simple move which people copy and accidentally or intentionally forgot to mention its origins.
That's rocking. That's rocking.
That is rocking. So in 2014, 2018 era was when cutting shapes was developed by American dancers, and in 2016 onwards, the cutting shape style was further developed by the Spanish and Latin American dancers. And that style of shapes is what we see it today, which at this point, cutting shapes today no longer looks like the cutting shapes when UK Shuffle was also synonymously used as cutting shapes, and also cutting shapes compared to how it originated, it does look completely different compared to back then. So it is definitely worth discussing how we move forward as a community. Do we talk about shapes as we see it today? Do we label, like change the labels even? You know, if cutting shapes never even was a term, we would not be having a discussion. It would have been UK Shuffle. Then when the Americans developed it, it would have been American style of shuffle or whatever. And then when it developed in Spain and Latin Americans, maybe it was Colombian Shuffle or Spanish Shuffle, right? But simply because it stemmed from the word cutting shapes and people were inspired by that UK Shuffle / cutting shape style, that is when things started to get a little bit messy. And now, is it even accurate to use shuffle or shuffle dance as a umbrella term for everything?
So I want to point out, because like I know you guys keep going back and forth about like the differences that Lefty and I have, because like he points out that we can keep it like how we have it, and you know, having a style that's like technically like an old style, and Jordan's like trying to touch on this too. If we keep that, which honestly it's bound to happen because we have like a lot of events in the midst of all this, and categorizing is like very last minute. It's a lot of work, and it involves a lot of time within events and organization. So we have no choice but at this point to like judge, you know, shuffle battles and take into consideration like certain things. But right now it's like now you as a judge, or who you as an organizer, who you're hiring judges that hopefully are advanced within both styles and recognize you don't necessarily have to go off of a foundation that's like on paper, at least right now for shapes, but you can tell when a shaper is an advanced shaper. I can put Mark Tor as an example. I can put Kento as an example. They're like they can shape, but they can shape at a very advanced level. So if you want to have a competition where it's mixing both styles, you would have to judge like that into consideration, but also keep the music into consideration, like keeping it fair enough for both styles that are being present. So it goes both ways with also knowing your community and who is it that's going to show up. If you know that your community is mainly Melbourne based, then you're going to cater to that with that music. If you know that's going to be more shapes, then you're going to cater to that music. But if you're going to be judging both, then it has to be also fair within the judge panel, and that you have a variety of people who know what they see.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly mention something about like Catherine's point too, and what was commented after it. I think that, like as I said before, like the term shuffling, some of is used to like the consolidation of the style. So when we say or see that the term shuffling was used in the UK, was it referred to like a consolidated style? Like were they using shuffle for the same style that was done in Melbourne, or like was it because of it was just the shuffling of the feet and they kept saying shuffling, shuffling, shuffling without being like a consolidated style? Just it was coming from that because the way this style consolidated in the UK in the decade of the early the 2010s, it had like this is what I see as kind of the consolidation of the style, and it was done like obviously like some years before as well. But that with the housewarmers and like when the movement started being more solid, that is when the consolidation of the style happens, and you see like more of a like community starting to exist, and how that also inspired people from Spain and from the US and also from Latin America. And that style of shapes, it's like an evolution of this original cutting shapes style that was done in the UK. You know, there's some things about like how the term was said in that time, like the cutting through the wind or like from the shape shifting. I've also read some screenshots from conversations with the original raver, which is like someone who was dancing in the raves in the UK back in the 80s and 90s, who says that other expressions were used to refer to that. I'm just finding them here because I want to mention specifically what the screenshot said. He said that there were also some sayings said that like cutting up the dance floor and throwing mad shapes, referring to what was danced in the UK. And there's no date for that, but he's just been a raver since the 80s and 90s, and he has a compilation of like what would be like shapes or like the UK like shuffling back in the days, like footage from 1989 to 95, which is like crazy to see like a lot of those clips.
He compiles
And
so much stuff. This guy is a legend.
yeah, yeah. And I even think that maybe the cutting shapes term, it might even go like earlier than 2010. Obviously, like it consolidated in the 2010s, but it could also be possible that it was used before. For my part, I still want to do more research on that, but I just think there's nothing that is like 100% sure and will never be, sadly. But yeah, I think that like the using the word shuffling, like now we hear shuffling and we're kind of like visually imagine a style of dancing, but back in the days when it was used, there was no like consolidated style like we have now. So we also have to like pay attention to that. And even if there's these conversations happening about like the cutting shapes and shuffling, because I was also seeing like some comments in the chat worried about like, oh, if we separate the communities, like they're not gonna like cipher together, because this happened in hip hop or and breaking. Like Dots was saying that in the chat, and I think we're just like trying to acknowledge both styles and its foundation and history. And communities are already like mixed and merged, and they still meet and dance together. So I don't think that's gonna change ever. And that's like that depends on us. Like if we don't want to separate, we won't. If if people start separating, that's because like they do. But I think that most people just like they still want to be together because we're like a huge community. And whether we like it or want it or not, shuffle and shapes will always be like brother styles because of history and what has been happening also in the last years. So we have to keep like just look forward. Communities won't break, to my perspective, and we can still have a lot of events where both styles are welcomed and will be valued in the competitions. And since battle is like a big topic of conversation and is important to many people, and also having some tournaments where styles can be separated, this can also be beneficial and like nourish, and also um, like be something to for people who might be craving that. I know there's people who is like cool having a lot of like mixed tournaments, but still I think there's gonna be now there's not a lot of shuffle tournaments, but the moment there starts being more, people will have everything to go to. So I think as a community, we're gonna be okay in general. Since I was seeing a little bit of like questioning in the chat.
May I say some other things, Marbiik? Everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? This that you mentioned about shuffle being a word and etc. This is very interesting when just discussing history, because in Melbourne, of course, it happened the same. People were using shuffle in the 90s to refer to just twisting the feet here and there, doing the raves, taking acid and going crazy with jungle music, etc. It only started to become from a verb to a noun to describe a dance style around late 2000, early 2000s. So it takes time. If I start to if I need to do this in other dance styles, but I do believe that in other dance styles, the same happened. A term which was originally a verb to describe dancing became a noun when people start to noticing, okay, this is a dance style. This is something that deserves a name. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting topic. So I can look for that in other perspectives, and that we are concerning about separating the communities, etc. I think we are in a point where we are like 6 years, 8 years since they are married, since Elena and Gabi became trendy on Instagram, Facebook, and etc. It's the status quo of the community now. Shapes and shufflers, or just shufflers, whatever you want to call it, in the same environment and etc. The competitive side of things, you may organize differently from region to region, but I think this is the situation, and separation is not an option anymore. And if you try to keep gatekeeping each other, it will only be negative. In 2016, that happened a lot, the discussions, and it wasn't productive. It just, I saw only negative things back then. And now we are reaching like a professional level of things. For many years, myself included, we were trying to turn this dance into more like a lifestyle, more like an internet thing, and turn into something else. We are getting to the level. We are in that level of something else. Discussions like this are important. Many people think that might be a waste of time, but from a professional perspective of a dance style, it's extremely important that peers communicate to each other and find balance and look for standards and etc. So yeah, I think that we are in a point where separating the community in the competitive side of things might be interesting, but overall, in community sense, it is not an option. And if people see it as an option, it only goes to negative effects.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well. Like, I think the intention is definitely not to like separate our communities. Like, our communities have been together for a very long time, and it's totally okay to be hanging out in the same spaces. Like, we dance to the same music, we love the same things. Like, it makes no sense to like separate it. This topic is coming about more so on a competitive side, and why it's important to I guess like categorize certain things so that there's no styles being lost along the way. You get certain things like people who are confused, people who, certain countries who like, other people came into their country and started calling it a different, and essentially you lose a style. And that's what we don't want for it to be happening here. Along with like certain things like how much music like how much the music at a battle like is important and things like that. So bringing awareness to all of this and talking about it, it's literally just about growing and becoming better. It's not necessarily about separating.
Can I jump in here? But yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with Marbiik and Leonette 100%. I don't think, even from the experience at TSO, I don't think that the current, in inverted commas, shuffling community is destined to be separated. But there are elements I experienced in the UK. I've been dancing in the UK since 2009. I was associated with Housewarmers and Pattern House, Cassidy Chaps, Mr. Shapes, Puff the Houseman, all the way through 2015, 2016, 2017, in advance of the COVID lockdowns, etc. And then we were reviving this Shapers society and community around almost the whole of the UK with elements like the UK Shuffle Team and UK Shuffle Dance, etc. Cyphers out in the street. One of the most empowering elements I'm finding from the shuffling community is the fact that all styles show up and vibe and bounce and step in their own intrinsic fashions, in their own modified variants of the same dance style. But we all dance and we step powerfully to the same beat, and we celebrate the pros and cons. We celebrate the powers of each of the dancers that step in. This is something that the hip hop community doesn't have. There is, you can probably name 10, 18 different variations of hip hop dancing. There's whacking, there's tutting, there's popping, variations of b-boy, and then there's crumpers, etc. These styles, the reason I brought up the Red Bull All Stars, it's one of the largest commercial. If you were to Google All Stars, probably the first thing that pops up. One of the largest commercial examples of a bunch of dancers coming together. And jumping in the Red Bull All Stars competition myself, I have witnessed judges literally jump on the mic to highlight dance styles not accepted here on this day or at this time. And it's the success of the shuffle community where we continue to grow, will become more popular, more eyes on us. Our events will become bigger. Compare TSL this year to the size of TSL last year. TSL next year is probably going to be even larger, even a greater impact on the community, even a greater sharing of the content and the representation of what shuffling is. And in the continuation of its growth, one of the most powerful things of it is the fact that all of these variations of shuffling, variations of shapers, variations of pattern and shape cutters, as we refer to it in the UK, which is highly referring to the earlier styles, throwing a lot of your arms, generating patterns and shapes with your arms as well as your legs in the initial origins of the style. The acceptance of all of that at the same time is one of the most beautiful things that happens in this community. And it may be one of the gems, one of the elements that has allowed the community to grow so seamlessly, because we are so accepting of all styles. if anything, what I'm throwing in here is that I wish 10 years from now that we appreciate all of the different variants, but at no point do we accept the elimination, the separation, or the putting down of someone for picking their particular variant and celebrating that variant more than another.
Okay, I have a question.
Oh, okay. It's not. It's not. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So is the general consensus to separate them out going forward in battles or to move forward as it all being one under shuffling?
I think tournaments, they're not gonna be limited to separation or combination. This comes down to each and every, like each particular organizer. I think there's always been the possibility to separate and do like shuffle category and cutting shapes category. This has been happening in Russia and China. They have been countries mentioned in different calls already, and some people just like put shuffle tournament and just allow everything in. I think that like we always had the option to do it, but like we didn't do it. Like at least in Spain, we did not do it. And I've participated in competitions where there was like shuffling cutting shapes competitions in Russia in 2019. It was I think it's still like something that even if in the countries that are done, there's still like more things to be learned. Because from my experience, for example, Shuvlis and I both danced in the shuffle and in the shapes category, and Shuflis ended up winning the cutting shapes category, which is a bit funny because Shuflis does not practice shapes that much. Like he knows some moves, but his specialty in those two is like shuffling. So it's still like it's curious, you know, to see this like happening. Not that Shufli is not a good dancer and can like beat and like win battles, but it was like definitely a particular experience because we didn't have it separated, and also he won like the cutting shapes, and it kind of also was like a meme within Spain, like Shuflis winning cutting shapes. but um but I think that this will come down to every organizer and how they want to set up their tournament, and also what is the community that you have, or like most of the dancers that are going to attend are more inclined to. You know, if for example in Spain there it makes a lot of sense to have mixed slash hybrid shuffle shapes competitions because there's a lot of dancers who dance both. And if you would do like a cutting shapes and shuffle competitions, there still would be like a lot of people interested because there's a lot of shapers and there's also a lot of shufflers. But mixed competitions here is like something that it always made a lot of sense, and that is something that in Spain will still happening. My bet is that CSL will probably just remain the same like format, but as a hybrid competition, not like with the word hybrid, but an inclusive like shuffle and like cutting shapes competition. And yeah, and I think maybe from now on, since this is being open, also people who wanna do separate categories will like start doing so, because like it looks like a something that is being talked, and kind of like as Luva said at the beginning, this has been like a taboo, and I'm aware some people might not have hosted it like this because they would maybe get hate from part of the community who wanted to like group everything together. So I just feel like as long as organizers all are clear with the format, whether it's like just shuffle and shape separate or together, which is something that has been happening, I think both are just something that will coexist and will be beneficial for like everyone in general.
I agree. And kind of an example that I can stem off of is Marcos, when you and I were paired up for the FTS tournament. And I took the first round, and You did not, and there was confusion as to why, and I feel like I felt that confusion reversed when I went to TSL, and so it's just nice to have, even if it's not separated, it's nice to have some type of clarity as to what location specifically favors what style or what hybrid style or whatever that their shuffling is. It's nice to have clarity on that so that people can know what type of things they're going and submersing themselves into, and like what type of organizations are doing what, just so there's not confusion in terms of round decisions or what people are bringing to rounds. So I'm trying to like catch up to the chat at the same time, but yeah.
Yeah, I know Jalen just jumped in before he like says that. I wanted to relate it to what Autumn was saying, but like that we have to be like we have to know what are we submersing ourselves into. It has a lot to do with like each country have their like culture and their like approach on shuffling that has been happening for years. And also Mawana from Peru was also like saying stuff about like, hey, like each country actually has like their kind of like approach on this. So if they want to like host events or do stuff a certain way and still be respectful and just like be clear about how it's gonna work, I think we all have to respect that and just acknowledge that like places that we might go to might be very different from where we come from. And yeah, I think TSL is like a proof of that, because like as you said, Autumn, you came here and you've seen like a lot of dancers who dance the same style than you, but a lot of different things within the same style or with the shapes and shuffle merge. And also just because of how shuffling has been like worked on here and danced for a lot of years, and also the music we dance to regularly, that all of this like plays a role in this. So we just gotta be also aware that there's a lot of cultures, and even if we are the same like dance culture as countries and communities, we are also different, and we have to like learn from the different cultures, because that will only bring beneficial and like stuff for us and like growth to actually like get to know other communities and cultures. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I would like to address a couple questions that were raised in the chat that haven't been discussed. And a lot of the topic has been regarding battling. And for the sake of the education aspect and educators, including myself, including Mary Grace, Alex, Marbiik, and so many people here who also teach classes, there were two questions raised. From Mary Grace: is it possible to teach your style that you do know the history on, while also paying respects and acknowledging different styles exist, and having references on people who know enough of that to point students to? And from Alex: does anyone have recommendations on how to address this as an educator in the in-between phases of figuring it out? Is it a proceed as usual, parentheses, honoring the history of each style of the course, and updating our information as conclusions becoming more concrete?
These questions are towards classes, right?
Yes.
Is this okay?
How
The
do
questions
yeah.
were a little bit too big. So how we can explain history to the students during the classes? More like this. The question were a little too big. I lost myself in my thoughts. It's something like this, right?
So more
Those
or
lines.
less, it seems to be a loophole right now where we can't agree on one thing. So as educators,
Okay. Okay.
how do we communicate this to students that what they are teaching is based off of their findings and their viewpoints? Like, is it
Oh, I see.
simply as simple as that saying this is my current viewpoint and in the future it may change, and making sure you're not making a statement as you're teaching these things? Or yeah, I think it really is an important thing to discuss this, not only for battling but also for the education aspect.
Okay. Since I have formal I learned this. That 6 years of my life to become a dance teacher. I want to answer that because we discussed that a lot during our classes in the university. But since the topic is still open, I would say address carefully with your students how you will discuss this with them, especially the beginners, because beginners they usually are more prone to put things into boxes. When intermediates, they already have a much more control and understanding of the move, so they understand a little more these little nuances, these little details, and they understand a little bit more. But it's more, I would say, take more careful with the beginners, because if you put, okay, this is shapes, this is shuffling, it might be a little confusing, because when you are doing some classes with choreos and start adding some other moves from one thing to another, they will get a little confused. Okay, but this is shuffling, this is what. Yeah, I would say take a little careful with the beginners, but once they got more intermediate or advanced, they will understand better these differences. But yeah, beginners should learn basics and have fun understanding all these dynamics and terms. It takes time for them to see if they first are interested, and then start slowly giving them this information. I hope I answered your questions.
There's a topic within the comments that like I think it's worth bringing out, and it goes back to being a hybrid. And I like the example that Ruby brought out because it actually made me scratch my head. He said, like, what would you call, like, if we're trying to stay away from the like term hybrid competition wise, like, what would you call people from Spain? And he said that high level on both. And then my response to that was that I personally wouldn't consider like what I saw in Spain, a lot of people being high level on both, at least like not Melbourne wise. I actually saw it more shape driven and then mixing styles. And the reason I'm basing that off is because going back to Melbourne, like if you want to be high level in Melbourne, then you have to do the Melbourne style by itself enough to get it to a high level, and then dedicate its time to shaping by itself. When you're mixing like both styles, like this is what is causing the confusion that we have right now. It's like people are like, oh, I don't know which one to go to. I'm sorry, but competitively, you have to stick to one. And it's hard to tell you guys that like in Spain because you already have like your culture. And I'm not saying to like go back or like change the things. You guys can keep it like however it is that you want it. But yeah, like touching on that topic, like to be like a high level Melbourne shuffler, you have to like stick just to Melbourne foundation and then let that speak for itself.
Yeah, like I wanna also add that like there is also been like a lot of like some chats about um like kind of like a shuffle style that if you see some videos on YouTube from like the past decade, where some style was referred as also like house shuffle, that is like basically like a kind of like something that like stems from the Melbourne shuffle branch, but it tends to house music changes a lot the way it's like performed. So it's not as like this like hardstyle shuffle, Maryland shuffle. Nor it's like Cali, nor it's like Malaysian, nor it's like Russian. It's like it's like a particular because of like the music. So same way as of like when we say like you have to stick, for example, to Melbourne shuffle in a shuffle competition, like with Melbourne, do you, for example, mean like the specific Melbourne style or everything that branches off from like the Melbourne style? Because like if there's a shuffle competition, like Cali style, I think would be valid. I think Malaysian and like Russian and all these like shuffle styles that are not like the shapes part, which we can see a foundation changing. like how do you like when you said like you have to stick to Melbourne shuffling? Is it just Melbourne or all those like other styles too?
I have that question too, because what if
Wait,
someone?
wait, can you say that one more time? Sorry, multitasking.
Yeah, Catherine, at this point,
Oh.
it's difficult to multitask. um, yeah, my question was that when we do like a shuffle competition, and you mentioned before you have to stick to Melbourne. Is it like the specific Melbourne style that it has to be like done the Melbourne way, or is it all the sub styles that stem from the Melbourne, like Malaysian, Russian, Cali, and also as I said, like there's kind of like this way of shuffling that is like to house music and like subgenres, which is something that it was kind of present in Europe, and so like all of the shuffle styles that are like yeah like a branch of the Melbourne. So when you say stick to Melbourne, or how do you see or how do you picture it, like just Melbourne or including all
Well,
those
so
things?
so it depends on how you're categorizing the competition. I put that one as an example because you guys call it shuffle, and from what we're coming to understand right now, if we're trying to categorize shuffle versus cutting shapes, I say Melbourne because that's the one that's like a clear indicator of like which one's different from one another. But I'm technically referring to like shuffle within itself and what we consider shuffle foundation to be, which goes back to the Melbourne roots. Um, but yeah, what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
No, no,
So
like
like,
that
oh yeah,
that
oh yeah. So
that
like,
was the
so like
question.
categorizing, yeah. So like, it depends on how you're categorizing the tournament. Um, and I was just mainly basing it off of like what Ruby said because Mary Grace brought up a question that I was like, oh, so like, what like as a hybrid dancer, like which one like would you consider yourself? And like to me, like it's like, all right, so which one are you stronger at? If you're stronger at shapes, then further develop that while personally still mixing styles. Like I mix styles like all the time, all types of dance styles. Like whichever I gravitate to or whichever one I like, I dedicate each one its deserved time or whatever it is that I'm deeming in my personal life or whatever. But what I'm trying to say, like competitively, then that's where this is like a bigger like issue and why labels are like important.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I also do agree with that, that if there's like a shuffle um, category, it should be everything that branches off like from Melbourne.
To me should be every branch that everything because the foundation are the same from all of them. Rocking, hardstyle, shuffle, mass, original mass or Brazilian mass, Russian, Kali, all of them follow the T shuffle running man structure. Of course, there are all obvious differences from each other. Hardstyle shufflers use fat pans, go much more left and right. Kali, that earthquake running man, and there are differences, but in a sense, all of them are still T shuffle running man. Some places, I think in China, they have, for example, a specific segment for only hardstyle shufflers. So if you use fat pants, hoodies, go left and right, 2007 style, only people doing that should compete. But again, China has a big, a huge number of shufflers doing this way. But I think for us Westerns, it should be just you shuffling competition. Okay, T shuffle running man is your basic, regardless of sub style, etc.
So in a battle, if it's labeled as just a shuffle battle, it is only encompassing Cali, Moss, and Melbourne.
These are just like ideas, but it would need to be like the foundation, not like just you can only do those styles, but like know the foundation, and not that you can't like throw one or like some shapes in between if that's like the flow, but also like find a good like just build from that foundation. If that's like the category, you know, because you can also be like in a shapes competition, and you can't also do like all Melbourne, you know, even if it's like it's history related or style related.
That's why I mentioned like percentage doing a round. Like if you want to go full shuffle competition, all Melbourne branches, okay. How much of foundation you need to add in a round to be considered as a shuffle round, regardless of style? No, again, debatable. Lots of debates. But I would suggest experimentation. Try this sometime and see what could happen. Suggestions from someone outside your scenes.
So how would foundation be judged beyond just the steps?
Can you say that again?
How
Can you
would
rephrase?
foundation in a battle be judged beyond just the steps?
FTO, Kento Marbiik, want to address that?
No, yeah, no, I'm not understanding.
Because, like, or I guess just making it more simple, how would we be judging foundation? Like, would it be like the cleanliness of your T step? Would it be the groove? Would it be putting in a running man? Like, what would foundation be judged on?
That's why it depends on how you're categorizing the competition. Like right now here in the US, like we can agree that like it's mainly being judged based on Melbourne Foundation. And it's probably going to stay that way because the people that show up to the battles are mainly like that style driven. But like if we start getting competitions that are coming up where they do want to categorize it or specify, oh, it's going to be Melbourne, then that's an indicator for the competitors. But if they want to make it like more generalizing or inclusive of both of them, they can specify that too. But as far as like foundation is going to be judged when they have like both styles into consideration, I kind of said this before, but you can tell when a shaper it's advanced, like whether you know their foundational style, their foundational steps or things like that. So yeah.
So my opinion is like I had the situation like last weekend because we had a little tournament, like nothing big or like official, but we had a tournament and we had like very Melbourne focused shufflers versus shapers, and it was kind of hard sometimes to judge it because like the technique and the execution of both styles, like in this particular order, is very different. And for me, it's not about like comparing the technique of the both dances itself. It's more about like rating the technique inside the dance. So if you have like a Melbourne shuffler and he's got a good or like for example a Melbourne focused shuffler and he is very good in his foundations of the running man and the T-step, and it's got like for example like 8 points out of 10 for the technique of this especially style. And then you have the shaper and his running man and his T-step maybe is not as good as the other ones, but his shape foundations and the movement is so clear, and he's got the very good technique focused on this part. So you also can rate it with the same numbers, like also like 8 out of 10, for example. So you will have the option to compare the rating of this focused technique, in my opinion, than just compare the dance technique itself. If you can follow me, it's a little bit difficult to understand or like to explain.
I agree with Lefty in the chat really quick, like not seeing things changing for the sake of history. Um like it's nice that it's here, but I feel like things are so different right now that we have to focus on like what it is right now in a way. Like just for this specific topic that I think we're communicating in the comments.
How do we like go from place of right now while preserving the history? I feel like I keep coming back to that part because I'm just confused
Yeah.
how
I
you
think
would go forward and even like just teaching it. Like if you want to teach, hey, here's this history of UK shuffling
yeah.
or shuffling in the UK, but it developed into cutting shapes and that's a different style now. Is that how you would present that if you're teaching it?
Mm,
I
I
was
would
going to
try
say, I
to
think that's actually, I think that's contributing to the confusion that we're having. When we bring up this idea of quantifying a dancer's performance based on the foundations that they're bringing, the foundations of shaping and the foundations of shuffling are appearing to be two different things. So that would suggest that the judging of these dancers and even the rounds or categories that these dancers are battling in are completely separated because they're being judged on a different recipe, if you know what I mean. But if we were alternatively to be using a universal term of shuffling and judging these dancers as per an all styles battle, accepting both in the same ring, then it would almost have to not emphasize the presence or prioritize the foundations of either style and accept both of them on an equal plane. But though that is two different things. To judge a dancer on their foundations or to judge them on their modern interpretation and performance as it is today are two separate things.
Yeah, like I just want to say that when we now look at like history, things that happen are very recent. So what happened in the decade of the like 2010, it's something like it has happened like 10, 15 years ago. And like the Melbourne part is like it has like some more years. So it looks like, oh, this is like something recent. So we have to kind of look back. But in 15, 20 years, it will like this, like what happened in 2020 in the 2010s with shapes will look as like something that is far, and this will be what's going to be looked at to me, you know. So I think that the consolidation of the cutting shapes as a style in the UK, it's something that is very important, and in a couple of years this will be seen as the history of like the consolidation of the style. It just so happens now to be so recent that we're like, oh, is this like something actually like that like historically like old that we have to like pay attention, and we also want to look like even like further like back. So I know this is also like something that I ask myself, like, is this like something that we just have to like always go and look like even like to older dates, or like can we also see as the consolidation of shapes as like with their foundation as like the actual like event that is like pivotal, you know, for this style. Because if I were to teach someone how to cut shapes from scratch, it would be completely different from teaching someone how to shuffle. Like for a shuffle, I would start basic running man and T-step. For the cutting shapes, like I think no one here would start with like running man and T-step, or even like some variations like poly pocket, or like some T-step variations are not like the foundation of the shapes. They are some used steps, but they're not foundation. It's more important like the shape shifting, or like the upper body groove, you know, like these changes of the body, and like some like feet shuffling, why you do that. So I think that like that is a good question, you know, like if you had to teach the style from scratch, would you teach like the same way shuffling and shapes or not? Because that can answer like or like kind of like clear the air with like some of the thoughts we have.
Kat, what was your question about? Like, were you asking that question about as an instructor, how would you teach? How would you like honor the history? Can you like rephrase your question? Because I think I had a thought about it.
Yes. So we're speaking to this conversation from when cutting shapes became a term to how it is perceived now. And so then in cutting shapes came from the UK style of shuffling, and then it was evolved by many different countries to resemble something very different than how it was originally done in the UK. And so then I wonder, as a teacher, how do you preserve the history that came out of the UK with shuffling while also saying, but from this point on, it's a completely different style, if that makes sense. If you're teaching shuffle history, like, do you include the UK style of shuffling and then just say, but now it's branched out to a sub style that's not part of shuffling? Does that make
I would
sense?
yeah, no, it makes sense. Honestly, I feel like that comes to the instructor on a way that they feel they are, like, adequately expressing the importance of both. So I feel like just the more that you gather the resources that you feel are necessary in, like, having the respect for both of them, I feel like like, it seems abrupt to just, like, teach people, "Well, it's something completely different now, so forget everything that this is, it's now this." Like, I would just show importance to both and try to, like, embody that in the way that you're teaching or, like, expressing the style and the step, like, show how the step started and maybe show how it was evolved. So I like that question. That's a really good question because that's essentially how we're going to show respect to both the history of things as well as the evolution of things, is when we inform everyone on both of those.
Yeah, and I agree with your point entirely. And I think that that's kind of where I come from in these conversations is that I feel like if you're looking at cutting shapes from just the point of now or the point of when it became a term to when it evolved, then a lot of the history of the UK style of shuffling could get lost in translation with separating it, with saying it's not a part of shuffling, but they were referring to it as shuffling in the UK up to a certain point until cutting shapes kind of took over. And so I feel like um, that to me is why it seems as though it should be under the same umbrella term. I also feel, some of the foundations of shapes did come from variations of running mans and variations of T steps. And then it did evolve over time to, cutting shapes how we see it today. But I guess just as an educator, it would be how to pay respect to both while acknowledging that, it did take a completely different route and evolved to something much more than what it was or how it started in the UK.
I want to address some things. Catherine, when you ask this, who is your target public target? And anyway, experienced shufflers, beginners, who are you teaching that? Who are you aiming to teach that?
I mean, anyone, I guess, who shows up to a class.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's
Okay.
like from a beginner standpoint, and, if someone were to come to me and be like, what's the history of shuffling? I would want to encompass all these things. Or if someone's questioning why cutting shapes isn't a part of shuffling.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be, I guess, did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes. I'm asking this because when I studied dance in university, again, it's a very different situation than anyone else. But again, it's good that we have different perspectives. We always think on who we are going to teach. We are going to teach 5 years old children. We are going to teach teenagers. We're going to teach adults. We're going to teach elder, because the age and their objectives will affect the class. So, for example, if we are going to teach beginners, like they watched someone's video on Instagram or TikTok, they wanted to learn. We go, okay, how are we gonna address that? They want to learn those moves. So what's more important, what I think it is the correct shuffle or correct shapes or whatever, or what the student wants? I think that the first thing would be this. And second, as I said before, for beginners, trying to put things into boxes it's not ideal. I would say if many people are doing this since, I don't know, 6, 7 years from now on, A shuffle class, like with a choreo, put everything together. And over time, when that class start to get more and more advanced, they understand more of the moves. You start to explaining them history. Start explaining them. Okay, these moves comes from this part of the Melbourne Shuffle branch, or this one comes from the from the cutting ships in the beginning in the UK, something like this. We always learned when I was in the university that throwing too much information to beginners, they got like scared. Not just information text, but information moves. Imagine that you are going to a driving class. Imagine that at your first day of a class, you grab a Skyline R34 and start doing drifts. It's gonna scare you. It's too much information for you. It's not like with a Corolla slow with like 30 miles per hour or slower than that. I mean, you get what I mean? Throw a lot of things to the beginners, and after time, with time, explaining them more deeper. There's a lot of things that there's some critics that a lot of people throw into. Many of you in the US like, oh, those classes, they don't teach history. Yeah, of course, in a 1 hour class to beginners who don't have time to teach history, they are not interested in learning history. They are interested in learning the choreo and use it in a festival. So yeah, I would not say to beginners. Beginners should just learn. After some time, they start to get more intermediate. Okay, then you start to teach them history over time, etc. Did I answer your question?
I mean, I agree with that. I guess I was maybe more so speaking of from a place from people who are interested in diving in more. Because I do agree with you that, some people could care less. They just want to show up and they just want to dance and get down and that's it. And they don't care about going back to learn the history of it. But once you get to a place, or if you get to a place where you do want to dive deeper, that's where my question kind of stems from, is how to preserve the history that came before that has been documented and still evolve with the change over time.
Is
Because I think
bringing
in a lot of the history conversations, like in shuffling, the UK history either gets categorized differently or labeled differently or not even really put into the narrative. And that's where I just get confused.
what is like your perception of something being preserved? Like, is it having it out there for a resource, or is it like putting it into action? Like when does it feel like it's preserved, if that makes sense? Like, does it have to be actively going, or does it have to be like out there as a resource?
That's a good question. I feel like having it out there as a resource, like if someone is to come and say, "Hey, where do cutting shapes come from? Like, what's the history here? Why is this separate? Why is this different?" Being able to look back to the timeline and, pull from documented history. So I guess just having it out there as a resource, but then also agreeing whether that part of the timeline of shuffling or whether it should be separated as something different.
Yeah.
Thoughts? Are you there?
Yep.
Thoughts? I want to
Yeah, I'm
make a
present.
question to you. I want to make a question to you since you are active in the UK since 2009 and you have contact with many of the pioneers in your scene. This is a question. I think I tried to make this question to Mr. Shapes or Cassidy years ago, but I don't remember what they answered. But I want to answer to you. I want you to listen to you. Maybe you know this question. What they think about all these changes that we are discussing since cutting ships start to get trend in trendy during 2014, 2015 in Facebook, Instagram, and many people around the world dancing differently from what they or you do. What are their general thoughts about it? Because people, for talking about the Melbourne part of the things, people from Melbourne hate everything that happened after YouTube. And those who were in the YouTube days, they feel ashamed for being part of it. They don't want to be remembered of all of this. But what are the thoughts between you in UK regarding everything that happened after you got you got famous online?
I say I don't think that the UK community is purist minded. Pattern shapes, foreign patterns, house dancing in general, dancing to EDM music at all is not something that we own. It's not something that we wanted to hide from the world or something that we want to keep to ourselves. The fact that it's grown and been discovered by other countries and they are basically speaking our words in their own language, they've evolved it to something else, they can change the name of it. They can change the way that they teach it. I do really agree with what Kat was saying in terms of if somebody new steps into your classroom, never thrown a shape before, and they ask you to teach them their first move, you have to make a decision as to whether you go down the foundations of shaping or you go down the foundations of Melbourne shuffling. Neither of those options are incorrect. Neither of those options are, disrespectful to the heritage that's grown up in the UK. It's just that's the path, that's the focus, that's the element of it that you wish to prioritize. And also this concept of introducing new people to the community, making reference to or just illuminating them to the fact of, to the best of your knowledge, this is where this move originates from the first time you saw that move, from insert dancer here on YouTube or Instagram, etc. There is no disadvantage to looking back and, stopping our community from losing its history. So, for bringing up Cassidy's name, etc., bringing up Pattern House, keeping housewarmers in the hearts of thousands of dancers around the world, there is no disadvantage to doing that. But also, it would be a shame to see it disappear, put it that way. The community is stronger for knowing its origins, but the community will only get stronger if it continues to evolve and change what it is today, rather than we, get completely obsessed with the foundations and then never actually evolve to a new move, never discover something new because we hold ourselves in handcuffs to the foundations. It's respect where we came from, but then definitely don't hesitate, don't hold back on evolving and going to something new.
Yeah, that's really interesting to listen. That's really interesting to listen.
The
Yeah,
more
thank
of
you.
us that
Thank
join
you
the
for that.
community, the better it is, 100%.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's a very different mentality from pretty much everything in Melbourne. From Australia itself, Gara is not here, but I can say with from his mouth and Angelos, which are both of them from Melbourne. Australians in general, they hate everything that happened with shuffling. They absolutely hate. I'm not talking just about party rock. I'm just even the Kali people, Lefty, and everyone doing that big running man on everything else. Australia hates their own creation. It's absurd how they dissolve what they created. Seriously. So that's what I wanted to listen for you. If the perspective was very different, and unfortunately is, because the movement, and from what I watched in the videos, the movement and the feeling is much more open, is much more inviting. While in Melbourne, and again, I'm not talking about that thing, it's just a characteristic of that scene. It was hard stomping and rooted in their own traditions, and that unfortunately affected all the other styles and their mentalities as well. But again, I just wanted to listen from someone from the UK scene what happened there and their thoughts. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's why when I first jumped on the call, I immediately started making comparisons to the hip hop community, because this concept of battling, from my perspective, is coming down the route of breakdance battles, hip hop battles, battling in clubs, etc. And the competitive nature of it has resulted in now, as a dancer, you've come to an art form that you love, that you really enjoy, it makes you happy. You are going to be, first of all, you're going to be judged. Secondly, the judges have to quantify who is the winner. So it pressurizes the dance. But also, this is even the reason why now we are breaking ourselves into different categories, because there will be some who feel more akin or prefer one style over the other. Some would say one style for them is better than the other. This is 100% an evolution of just the concept of attempting to quantify the art form. Somebody has to win the battle. Somebody has to be better than the other. And I would say that going down the route of the hip hop community, at least in my experience in some parts of America and the UK, is the separation is going to divide the community. The more categories we have, the less of us there are in each category. So it would be lovely to see us all combine the categories as best we can. Whether we pull up to a competition and there's you break all the dances into two separate battles. In the same way we currently have 1v1 and we have 3v3. What if we had foundations and all styles, etc.? So we're all still bringing whatever unique taste you want to, but if there is a particular part of it that you want to celebrate, then that's the category that you jump into. And it's just this concept of, I don't want any of the dancers here to get kicked out of the room, basically, as a result of us defining our dictionary and dance.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that to us.
Thank you so much, Dots. You are the
Man
goat.
speaks English and
You're
facts.
the goat.
That's what Lefty said. Okay, we are reaching almost 3 hours. So Marbiik, Kento, do you want to summarize?
Yeah, recording is like almost 2.5 hours. I don't know if there's maybe like a last question or topic being like someone wants to like bring up. If not, we can kind of like call it for like the like what has been like the chat so far, and this will be recorded. And I'm sure there's people who might want to stay a little longer and have like an extra chat. But yeah, if there's something that wants to be brought up, you can say it in the chat. I'm reading, or just like unmute yourself and say it here if that's someone whom is in the stage. So yep, if someone wants to ask or bring something up, now's the time.
Is the chat recorded too?
Yeah, yeah, all the chat is recorded too.
Okay, word.
All right, well, it seems like we ended on a beautiful note from Dots, sharing how we can effectively and efficiently run future tournaments. From that perspective on, I think right now, the best thing we can do is agree to disagree and let each community run the way that they want to run it. It's only time and more dancing that I feel like we'll be able to bring more clarity as to the questions being brought up right now. I think the idea of catering those who like to merge and separate is a beautiful thing, like Dot said, not only just 1v1 versus 3v3, but also having a category for those who like to shuffle from the foundations branching from Melbourne, and those who like to shape, or whatever you define as what shaping or what shuffling is. I think having these separate categories are great for those who specialize in each of those styles, as well as there are many people who mix all of these styles. And also, because the term shuffle is interchangeably used throughout history, there are many people who are just amazing dancers, but it's difficult to put a label on them. I think it's important for hosts, as communities, as judges, to clearly define what is the criteria being seen when you do combine different styles of dance. I think we can all agree we all dance to electronic dance music, which is why in one of my previous posts, something like mentioning we're all rave dances, or we all dance to electronic dance music. This is something we can stem on for a future reference. But of course, there's nothing we need to agree on. Like, there's no need to like come to a conclusion. I think it's just important to keep having these discussions, but also not be married to these discussions, right? I personally will not be like continuously having these sleepless nights and talks. But I think what we've been having right now and the other calls that the had in Spanish and other calls being happening behind the scenes are a great push for the community for the development and growth for all together to coexist as one. Even if we may not agree that everything is shuffling, I think we all agree that we want to move forward as one because we are a unique community that is almost incomparable to other dance communities. We're so unique, and I think that should be celebrated. I think we should capitalize on everyone's unique styles and find a way to make many different perspectives happy in the tournament settings. And yeah, so those are some things about battling and some tournament systems. And with regards to education, it's important to just be very communicative, professional, and honest with your students. Say that you don't have all the answers. Say that the history is still being studied and written, and in the future, if there needs to be a correction, you're going to make that correction. As a teacher, as an educator, as a leader, I think it's responsible for every person to who teaches to be very clear on that. Like this is based off of your studies, this is your beliefs right now. But if there are some changes needing in the future, that this is an okay thing as well amongst the communities. Um, and once again, like Marbiik and I said at the very beginning of the call, we apologize for any misinformation or misunderstandings being spread amongst the community for the last few years or even just recently. So, uh, yeah, thank you all so much for approaching this from a professional and mature standpoint. Something that we did not have a few years ago when this topic was raised.
And
Yep.
that's make you and many others as professionals because you recognize your mistakes and you want to fix them over time. You are open to communicate and to see that you were right, that you were wrong, and want to fix them. This makes a professional, not necessarily who earns money, but who has ethics. This is an ethical thing, and I just want to say congrats to you, to all of you here present for paying attention to the subject and giving your time to shuffling because this is very important to us. And yeah, overall, thank you for that. I'm really happy for everything.
Yeah, just before we quickly saying something before wrapping up this call, as is being mentioned in the chat, we just need more events happening, and because same as Luva was saying, like if someone wants to try a format, just try it. Experience will teach us like the most. We can be here speaking and doing like talks for like endless hours that until we put up and set up events, we won't actually figure things out because like events will play a big role in how everything moves forward. So host events, even if they're like small, if they're big, it doesn't matter. Just try it, try to implement things, and we can always like adjust them and for future tournaments correct them if we feel something didn't was not like correct or it played a way we didn't plan to. So just like dance answers are on the dance floor nor nor here. So yeah, just like I hope everybody keeps traveling. I know a lot of people here in this call have been traveling the past year, so let's keep doing that. Let's meet in person, let's dance, let's share, let's host more events, meetups, classes, everything we can, and also stuff online. But yeah, let's try to actually be with each other in person when we get the chance to, and as often as we can. So yeah, looking forward to see how community moves forward and how we grow the professional scene and paying attention and actually having a lot of like conversation within the community. So thank you everybody for joining this call. This will be on on YouTube soon. We will like share the channel when it's up. So if anybody wants to like re-listen something, some parts, some of the dots spinning facts now at the end, this will be everything available. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining, and I hope to see you in future calls and in person events in the dance floor. So thank you everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Dance is the answer.
This is the answer.
Cause when you dance,
You lose yourself.
You lose your personality.
You connect an entire community. I love you guys. Thank you.
bye
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Muito
Thank you,
obrigado.
everyone.
Até a próxima.